All right, welcome to the Snowflake Sports Podcast. It is 7:42 Eastern Standard Time on August 18th. It is a Tuesday, and I am joined by Chris Amato, aka going to be Teacher of the Month somewhere soon.
Oh my God. These kids are, I hope no kids find me talking on this. I'm
Right.
actually, they'll be like, you're actually pretty cool. And your friend Dan's pretty cool.
Oh, dude, you play
But your,
Apex
but your hoops
Legends?
takes are trash is what they'll say, which I've already been told by a kid.
Oh, really? What was the
Yeah.
take? Just curious.
Um, it was something, I think I said that like, he said Joel Embiid was goated. That's what he said. This is like a
What?
seventh grade child. He says, oh, Embiid's goated.
Dude,
I'm
no.
like, no, he's not. He's,
He's not
it's
got
like
past the second round.
he's hurt all the time. They're injured all the time. The whole team's injured all the time. And I've said it on this show, and anyone who's like talked to me about anything NBA related, no, like I'm just anti just this whole Sixers core, this whole run that they've been on these last few years. Like it's just the wheels are falling off, and that's kind of what I was saying to this kid. And he just thinks that the sky's the limit, you know. And it's like I get it. Like when you're that age, like he hasn't seen this kind of thing happen before. Like he probably hasn't followed the league long enough to see these kind of cores and like the trajectory they're on, you know. Like I've seen teams like that rise and fall, you know, at this age.
Yeah.
And they feel like one of those teams that's just like, oh, they had a cool core and then they end up getting broken into pieces. Kind of like the Thunder, you know, except maybe worse because the Thunder at least,
I'd
you know,
say more
won.
like the Clippers, like the Chris Paul, like that
Yeah,
Lob
the Lob
City.
City Clippers are a
Yeah.
lot closer to that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's
Um,
our happened.
Yeah. So we don't have anything super concrete today on the agenda. We're just going to talk about NBA playoffs since that's just been kind of rolling. And then we
Yeah.
might end with the mail stuff going on, shutting
The
down the
mail. We're
post
gonna
office.
talk about the mail.
Talk about the
Can we
mail.
talk about the mail?
We got mail.
Always Sunny.
But let's lead to the Disney owns DeVos family Orlando Magic.
Yep.
Well, I guess they don't. Do they own them or just own
Disney
the
does
arena?
not own them. No, maybe they used to.
Oh,
They
okay.
used to own the Mighty Ducks,
Right.
and then they sold them and became the Ducks.
Yeah. So, but anyways, the Magic beat the Bucks today without Jonathan Isaac.
Tradition continues.
Yes, and so true home court advantage for the Orlando Magic. And Vucevic had dropped 35 points. I didn't really see these highlights because it was like a middle of the day stuff. But it looked like Brook Lopez just got torched, I assume, on the other
Yeah.
end. Um,
He's slow.
okay, what do you think about this upset? Do you think the Magic have any shot at winning another game, or?
I mean, so far the bubble hasn't been like this. I mean, there's been some freaky things happening in the bubble, but overall, I mean, you're still seeing things happen that probably would have happened anyways. I mean, remember last year? I mean, the Magic didn't they beat the Raptors game
They
one?
did. DJ Augustine
Yeah.
with like a
So,
step
so
back
yeah,
three.
so when I said the tradition continues, like that's what happened. DJ Augustine even, you know, he had a pretty solid game. He had 11 assists again today. So, you know, he's a guy who kind of steps up a lot. I mean, he's been I wouldn't say a clutch performer. He's never had championship moments, but he's, you know,
He has
a tougher
clutch
kind of
moment,
guy.
you know.
He's a tough, you know, defensive, he's a great team player. And he's a great guy to have. And that's why he's been around so long now. I think it's a good sign for them that, you know, Vucevic is able to be that kind of dominant force, you know, and compete against guys like Giannis and compete against a stacked Bucks team, even without Isaac, who's, you know, not going to be back till maybe sometime next year, if at all next year. So this isn't even a Magic team that's like hyped up, firing on all cylinders, because they're hurt too. Just like a lot of teams that, you know, we might talk about a lot of teams in these playoffs are. But I mean, until you see it happen twice, and especially given, you know, what the Magic are all of a sudden kind of prone to do in these game ones, you know, I don't expect anything different out of it.
Yeah, I don't know. So it just because when the Raptors played them, they had Marcus Gasol. That was like one of the main reasons. The main reasons why they got Marcus Gasol was to basically shut down Joel Embiid in that second round matchup. But like
Yeah.
he was clutch in shutting down Vucevic in that series. And I'm
Mhm.
shocked because like Brook Lopez has had a really good defensive year. Like
Mhm.
shots at the rim against the Bucks like just do not exist, and that's not only Giannis, that's also like Brook Lopez, and just I'm forgetting who their backup center is, maybe the other Lopez, but like they're basically
It is the other Lopez, yeah.
Yeah, they create like a wall kind of around him. Um, and the fact that Vucevic is able to kind of go to town on him, I'm assuming he's doing more like mid-range kind of jumpers. Um,
Yeah.
but I just think I don't know. I think Budenholzer is a good enough coach. I think this is enough to like just shock the team into being like, okay, we gotta like get it together now, and they'll
This
just
this happens every
yeah,
year.
yeah,
Not just the Magic, but somewhat, in one of the two 8-1 series, you see, I think it happened to LeBron before, I think. Actually, maybe not. I think actually LeBron's always like swept the first round. He had like a
nah.
7-year streak of always sweeping the first round.
There was that like Pacers series that went 7 though.
Was that
That
the
one.
first round?
Yeah, that was first round. That was the year. So the Pacers they went 7, and then they swept the Raptors in 4.
Was that his last year with the Cavs?
I think so. And
Okay.
then I think
Like
beat the
2018 or
Celtics
something.
in 5. I want to say. But yeah, 2018.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so I mean, it's a thing we've seen happen these last several years, and I think when I think of the Bucks, I think of a team that's like you have Giannis, obviously 7 foot, does everything, and then when it comes to like really big guys after that, and they're not unique in this, but they're not like a team that's really gonna like push you around. I mean, you have guys like Chris Middleton, you have guys like like Eric Bledsoe or Wesley Matthews, like not guys who are like these huge like physical forces. They're dynamic. They kind of are. Eric Bledsoe can be a playmaker, he can be a scorer. Um, but there's the kind of team where a guy like Vucevic, if he's hot and no one's stopping him, you'll just get a game like that and you can steal a game. And when I say steal a game, and also this game wasn't really that close. It wasn't like a buzzer beater. It wasn't like, oh, if one of the teams had an extra guy, it could have gone either way. Well, it was like a 12-point game. I mean,
yeah,
the last few minutes of the game, it was like you could turn the game off at that point. So that part was a little bit more shocking than the keeping in mind the fact that this just kind of happens sometimes with 8-1 matchups. But, it's just stupid for me at least, to think that anything is going to be different.
yeah. I mean, I can't even remember the last time an 8 seed won, except maybe was it the Warriors that like super fun
Yeah,
Baron Davis
that
team.
had to be the last time.
Yeah, because
'Cause
it's
I feel
it's
like
just
we
always
remember it.
it's always like 5 games, maybe 6, if it
Yeah.
gets interesting. But like even when it goes 6, you're just like, no, this is not gonna happen. This is not like hockey or anything where
Yeah, and Orlando doesn't have like the like those like the Don Nelson Warriors teams, that they I wouldn't say they were stacked, but they had guys that cumulatively had like this skill set of like being able to pour in a lot of points. Like Baron Davis, L. Harrington, and so on. Guys like that but that's not what the Magic have on their roster. When they don't have a roster where, oh, if they're all clicking, they're all scoring. Like, no, they have a roster that at its best can maybe play some good defense and can be, pretty tough. And that's why they're at this point and be consistent. Um, so they're not even built to me a roster that's like built for an upset either, the way like a Warriors team was, or if you want to go way back, you can go to the '99 Knicks or the other big notable 8-1 upset when they went all the way to the finals as an 8 seed in that lockout shortened year.
Knickerbockers.
Yeah, exactly. And that was a team that like had a few guys where if they're all clicking at the same time, they can pour in some points. You had Hall of Famer Patrick Ewing as well, who was really hurt at that point in his career, but you had Allen Houston, you had Latrell Sprewell, you had Anthony Johnson, you had all these guys.
Yeah. Plus, like a shortened season, like I feel like anything can happen. Though I guess this is technically a shortened out season. Also, okay, I'm totally just realizing this while looking at the box score. Aaron Gordon didn't even play.
No.
So like, they just had Vucevic. That's about it. Like Gary Clark and James Ennis as the other two starting forwards. It's like,
Yeah. No,
that's just
I
wild.
mean, you look at their rosters. I mean, they had a shortened bench for sure. I mean,
Oh yeah.
they had 9 guys getting minutes.
Though I feel like they are sneakily like a deep team on at least on the forward position. So like when you lose Jonathan Isaac, it's not that big of a deal because I've
No.
seen Kem Birch like play a decent amount, and I feel like he puts up at least defensively pretty good numbers.
Yeah, for
Um,
like a game or a couple games, I mean, you can
yeah,
get like
yeah,
2 or 3 guys to make up what Jonathan Isaac can do, I guess.
yeah, exactly. I don't know. This is just shocking. I think I
It's
think
a
the
cool
Bucks win
thing.
three.
It's a cool thing when that happens, especially in the
Yeah.
first round. It's like I think particularly in the NBA, which I think that I mean you can't argue that the NBA probably has the most predictable playoffs. At least in the early rounds, maybe even the whole thing, like
Well,
the most
like definitely the
predictable.
past decade, I feel like you
It's
could
the yeah,
predict.
it's I mean really the last most of my last 30 years, I would say. I mean, you look at the Jordan era, you kind of knew what was going to happen. Maybe the West had someone come out of there that was a little weird. I mean, sometimes you had the Blazers, sometimes you had, the Rocket or, the
Sonics
Rockets,
too.
and
Yeah.
then it was just the Jazz all the time, it seemed like, for a couple of years, a long time ago. So it was, that's just kind of how it was. And that's I think it's just the nature of the sport. It's a sport where it's kind of hard to, um, fake excellence because there's small rosters because basketball is only 12 or so guys. It's very apparent who's good and who's not because there's only 5 guys on each team on the court. And that's just and that just leads itself to things like more dynasties and more predictable early round matchups where 8-1 and 7-2 matchups are just kind of a bit of, you kind of yawn at them in the NBA compared to like what you've seen in hockey over the years or even in baseball, where things just happen, you get these bounces, guys, it's just the nature of the sport, guys are skating around, slipping around, you get a bad puck bounce, goalie's off or a goalie's on fire and, he's on a hot streak. Those are all things that like, there's so many more variables than there is in basketball, it feels like.
Well,
Um,
basketball too, right? Like you just score a ton of points. Like with hockey, I think this is especially true where it's like you could score a goal and then just kind of sit back and just play
yeah,
defense and just
yeah.
try to ride that out. That probably doesn't work, but you could try to score like two and like do that.
Yeah, in
Basketball, you can't
basketball,
really, you can't
yeah, you don't
score.
change your formation,
Yeah,
or your like lines and there's no lines in basketball, right? I
yeah,
mean, there's
exactly.
there's like subbing rotations, which is maybe the closest they have to that. But like in hockey, it's like, okay, we're not gonna be pushing the puck. We're gonna be dumping it, we're gonna be
Pucks in
changing our line.
D.
We're gonna keep ourselves fresh, dump it, change our lines more
Yeah.
often so that we can play better defense. And that just doesn't happen in the NBA. But yeah, but then you also see things like the Clippers Mavericks game. I think was like a big, it was a source of controversy. Even though I think the end result is like not different than what people expected. But if you watch the game, I mean, it was pretty crazy that first half. Mavericks were getting their asses kicked. It's like, oh, okay, here we go. Clippers are going into their little championship mode a little bit, potential championship mode. It was like 18-2, and then like the Mavericks have the lead, like or in the Mavericks have the lead like 35-32 by the end of the half or by the second quarter or whatever.
Oh yeah, they just went on a run.
And it was like a really crazy back and forth, and it was pretty much like even at the half. It was like not to be a great game, and then you see this whole thing with Porzingis kind of, they were getting in each other's face, and things were getting a little heated, and Porzingis gets a double tech, and he's out of the game. And Porzingis, my kind of negativity towards him is not really a secret, but as a Knicks fan, the way things went. But since the bubble, I mean, he's been what like everyone who ever want, everyone who drafted him, everyone who, endorsed him, everyone who thought he was going to be great. He's been what they think he could be. I mean, I think he's
Yeah.
been averaging 30 since the bubble started. And that's pretty crazy when you're 7+, 7-3. So he was a big factor in that, and they actually had a slight lead up until the time he got ejected.
Yeah. I mean, Twitter was kind of like the Mavs would have won if he didn't get that double tap, which could have happened. I mean, you can never after the fact. But Luka dropping 42 on
Yep.
his debut is just incredible. And then like today he came
That's,
out and was like, this is awful. Like I wish we would have won. Like saying all the great stuff that like the NBA greats all say. So like obviously this guy's gonna be one of the like top 20 players in the NBA in the future.
yeah.
But
He's gonna be he might be like he's gonna be the best European player who's ever lived.
oh yeah,
I would think. I mean, at this point, I mean he's the
he'll
only
be
guy
better
in the
than
team
Dirk, I
who.
think.
Yeah, I
It's
think
too
he'll end
early,
up
but
being better than Dirk. I think
yeah,
because of how dynamic he is, and how his size, his ability. He has like a Magic Johnson type of like you watch like YouTube highlight. I mean, because Magic Johnson retired when I was like an infant. So, you watch him at least on YouTube and stuff like that and old highlights. I mean, it just looks like Luka Doncic, right? And I mean, it looks like a large guy who can score, who gets boards, just plays lockdown, gets steals. And he's really the only one on the team who really like popped out before, like even with Porzingis getting ejected. Porzingis may have probably broke the 20-point barrier. But I mean,
He got 14,
it's
by the way.
yeah, like what I see the Mavericks still, and it's not a controversial opinion or anything, but they're a very unfinished product.
Yeah.
What that means in the short term is you get to see Luka Doncic do a lot of things by himself, which can be fun, but they're gonna run into these kind of walls where you're up against these tough, solid, deep teams like the Clippers and just can't break through, whether or not a guy like Porzingis is ejected or not. And his future health, who knows? I mean, he had a heel injury coming into all this and coming into the bubble, and it's still lingering now. So that's another thing to look out for is, who else can the Mavericks get, which has not been a strength of theirs either. I mean, the Mavericks, they're always in the free agency mix, They're always like a team that's rumored over the summer, and then like they tend to kind of strike out a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. Well, the whole
And
DeAndre Jordan thing where they had him.
yeah, I mean that's the most egregious example. But I mean, they're always in on like the big name guys or some big trade, and like 9 times out of 10, it just doesn't. They're never in the final conversation. So I think people looking at the Mavericks can see this as okay, they're progressing, they're competing against what is very likely a Western Conference champion, maybe in the Clippers. But it should show concern is like, all right, like what are they going to do to make sure that this isn't their ceiling? And you can't rely on Doncic being a 40+ point a game guy, or maybe you can. I don't know. It seems to be.
I mean, you kind of can. They really just need like another, or they just need to round out their bench because like I don't know, they're playing Finney Smith as like starting. Like I just don't think that's not really.
Yeah.
And like Tim Hardaway, like I feel like is a good player for them.
Yeah,
and
he's
he
been in
just
that role.
yeah, he needs to stick around that like third or fourth best player kind of thing.
Yeah.
I just don't know who they get. Like I feel like everyone's locked up on where they'll be at least next
Yeah.
year.
Your term like free agency picture is like bleak and depressing.
Yeah. Especially when Bradley Beal was like, I'm staying in Washington. And it's just like, okay,
Yeah.
nothing is happening this year.
Yeah, it's just easier to just take like the max contracts that you can get with your current team, and
Yeah.
not have to like piss everyone off.
I feel like what they need to shore up though is because their offense is great. I feel like you could totally trust Doncic to score 30 a game. I don't even think that's a stretch, and he'll get everyone else involved.
That's a normal thing now.
Yeah. So like
NBA.
what they got to do is they got to get like an Aaron Gordon or like just some defensive wing, like a Mo Harkless or something, where
Yeah.
they just like someone that can guard anyone on the floor and just be like, hey, I'm gonna play a ton of defense. You could ignore me on the offensive end, but I'm going to like help on a defensive end. And I think that's really where they need to try to find those players are like impossible to get because everyone needs those players nowadays. So it's a lot.
A lot of guys are just developing those kind of guys.
Yeah, that's true.
You don't see a lot of those kind of guys changing. Like guys like, Jonathan Isaac, guys like, Whiteside. I mean, well, he is a guy who ended up moving. Or even guys like Mitch Robinson on the Knicks. Those are all guys who are kind of like drafted in maybe, later draft picks. They're not guys that'll pop out at you in the NBA draft or pop out at you in college because they're not dynamic scorers. But guys who play really good defense, they're going to get you double-digit boards. They're going to do, and all of a sudden they're a guy who can be a part of a big three on your team, a top 3 or 4 on a good team. And
I
feel
don't
like
think Whiteside is. I wouldn't throw him in there.
you don't think Whiteside's is good enough to be like third best on like a team that's much better than the Mavericks.
No, because he's like fourth best on the Blazers, and he's like they're an 8 seed, and like they would probably be like a 4 seed if everyone was healthy, or something. He's not even like I don't know. He's probably like the 5th best player on this team.
Well, I mean, with what he was doing with the Heat, I mean, I don't know, like those are the kinds of guys you need, though. I mean, to me, I don't think the Blazers are that far away. They're just bad defensively is their problem. They don't have
Well,
besides
they're
him,
like the
they're
Mavs.
just-
They're exactly like the Mavs at this
they're
point.
very yeah. I mean, you have Doncic and Lillard kind of playing that role. Maybe Tim Hardaway and late career Melo are pretty similar. But then like they don't have anything compared with Porzingis. You have McCollum, who is probably better than any non-Doncic player on the Mavericks, I would say, as far as just being a scorer.
Yeah. Um, I mean, like I feel like McCollum's better than Porzingis, especially currently, and I don't think what like Porzingis' ceiling is. I feel like we're seeing it like almost right now, where it's
Yeah,
like he's an awesome number two, but he's
yeah.
never like if
Th-
he's the number one guy in your team, you're probably not going to go anywhere.
those short like 30 points a game stretches,
Yeah,
before like an injury starts acting up or before
yeah,
just something just weird happens, like this ejection. Like there's always something weird happening with him. It's like
yeah,
the Knicks stink is still like on him. Like it's like there's this weird like nothing's ever normal. Like no one when they say like no one confidently declares Porzingis as a crucial piece. I feel like. I
yeah,
feel like there's like always an and but. There's always like, people are, it's, no one's able to like, go off the ledge with him. Like it's still a wait and see thing, even though what is this, year 6 of his career now? He's
gotta
still
be.
young, he's still 25, 26 years old, but like next year you're going to start to see what his prime is. Like your late 20s in the NBA, 27, 28, you are what you are at that point.
Yeah,
So, I'm wondering, I'm not sure when his contract is up. They must have extended him, I'm pretty sure, as part of the trade.
yeah,
But, we'll see if they feel like if this near-term experiment with him, with this Doncic and Porzingis combo is something that has a hard ceiling or not, what else they try and do. But, in the meantime, competitive with the Clippers team, even after a controversial ejection, a Clippers team that's probably going to be pretty legit for the next couple years. So, it's not all bad, I guess.
yeah. Um, and I just at least going to the Clippers side, I just love seeing Patrick Beverly playing again.
Yeah,
He's just fun,
he's a
like,
grinder.
and he like just full court pressing someone as just like with ease is just great. And I just want to see more of that. Um, but like I don't know, I've been said this on my podcast. This has been said like all the time. They could just throw so much at you, and they could switch everything. Like every single player on the defensive side can match up with anyone that you have, including
They got Reggie Jackson as someone who's like
yeah,
on their bench.
he's their third point guard. Like
Yeah, like he is like a forgotten part of that roster, and he's a guy who can start for like a good amount of teams in the league. Not great team, not good teams really, but like real like NBA teams. Like,
yeah,
and he's like deep on their team. I mean, he could start for a team like the Knicks. He can start for maybe even some teams that got into the bubble, even if they didn't make the playoffs.
I think
So
he could start. Like he could have started with the Magic today if he
yeah,
like
oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, the point guards are hard to find.
yeah.
Point guards that are consistent and competent are hard to find.
Like Fultz
He
has had
hasn't been a great shooter. He's not
yeah.
someone you should lean on, but that also comes with not getting a lot of minutes as your shooting just gets worse. So you have to end up being good at other things and at least be good at getting boards, get a steal or two, dish, and those are the things that he's able to do for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Paul George too, like before or I guess during the bubble, he was shooting what, like 50% from three? It was
Yeah,
absurd. And he kind of cooled down yesterday. He shot 4 of 11, so for 36%.
pretty good.
Um, but I mean, my God. um,
Plus 13.
yeah, exactly. So I don't know. I think they're fine. This series will be fun in like they'll score a lot of points kind of thing. I'm assuming. Like I feel like you could easily see Doncic score above 40 again. Um,
Yeah.
and maybe they win, maybe they lose. I don't really know. Um, but yeah, so moving on, because I kind of liked the Sixers Celtics game last night. Like it was pretty close. The Sixers were up like a decent amount for it, and I felt like I mean, and then Tatum like kind of took over, and the Celtics were just I wouldn't say they cruised. Like it was pretty wire to wire the whole game,
Yeah.
but um, people were kind of just doubting the Sixers. It's just like, oh, like they're not going to do anything. They're just kind of roll over. It's just like
Well,
they
it's
still
just
have,
more injuries, like that's their thing. They
I guess. But
they
now
love
it's
getting
like
hurt.
it's Joel Embiid with 4 shooters. Like, isn't this what everyone's wanted to see since like day one? It's like all these like Ben Simmons haters that want them to trade Ben Simmons. It's like this is what you're gonna get if you don't
Well, when
have
you
Ben
lose a
Simmons.
guy without when it's injury though, you're not getting like
Yeah,
any.
that's true. Yeah.
It's presuming you're getting things in return for Ben Simmons that'll duplicate at least some of what he does and free up potential cap space because I don't think Ben Simmons has gotten his big payday yet. So
No,
I
but I
think
think he will like in a year or two, very
yeah, and
soon.
I think people who say that are trying to avoid that possibility because in their minds they don't think he's worth that. And I don't think he is. I think he's pretty good. I think most teams would love to have him. But I just, as I've probably said on here, I just don't think that like the Sixers core is like a championship core, and like they're built as if they're a finished product. I think like that's the thing that's most alarming. That is more alarming than if you care about the Mavericks or you care about even a team like the Blazers maybe, or the Pacers or the Heat, where it still feels like, they can still do it, like they're not a finished product. Maybe the Heat are. But the Sixers is like, no, this is it. Like, this is what we're going to be doing. Like, we're going to be having Embiid and Simmons, and we got Al Horford as another guy. We got Tobias Harris, was a recent signing. But I think some things have worked out too. I mean, they got some complementary pieces as well. Like, Tybal is pretty good. I've always been a fan of him when he was in uh, South Florida. Um, but it's just, I don't know, like it's hard to say any of that because of the injuries, and injuries are unfair, but it's like it's been such a consistent thing with them now that like you have to factor it in into any like understanding of what they're going to win.
Wait, though, Thibault, he played for Washington,
Oh, he was
University of
Washington. Okay,
Washington. Yeah, sorry, I was like
that's okay.
South
But
Florida.
yeah, I mean, he's a great like
But he's great. No, he's defensively, he does everything you want
yeah,
for you. He had,
super young.
yeah, well, he's rookie, I'm pretty sure, but
Yeah,
like he has 2 steals. But I feel like he kept breaking up passes left and right yesterday.
yeah,
Um, the problem with him is like offensively, he just doesn't really do much.
yeah.
So
And
I
he's
don't know
always
how
been.
he. Yeah,
Yeah,
but like okay, so Ben Simmons though, I feel like he gets a lot of hate for like not getting his jump shot or not being able to shoot the three, blah blah blah. But he just does everything else like at a superstar level
yeah.
that I feel like you could ignore the shot thing and like let him create for others. Um,
Who's he creating for though? That's the thing.
yeah, I mean this is the common
he
dilemma with
he
the
needs to be
Sixers.
he needs to be shooting because the roster is it's like it's almost as if they were banking on him becoming like what Jason Tatum has turned into, you know? I feel like they kind of want that kind of player out of him. They want him to look like that. They want him to be playing like that and to be accelerating his scoring ability. Which maybe that was unrealistic, because but he was a guy that like most of solid NBA players, they come out when they're really young. So there's some hope that you can turn a guy into something that he currently isn't. And that may have it's starting to look like it was a mistake. And it's a mistake that if they just double down on it and start paying him a lot of money, especially when not only in the NBA but in all sports, the caps are going to be flat or go down for the next year or two.
See, I don't know. So I don't think their problem is Simmons. I think their problem is giving Tobias Harris like 160 million or
Yeah,
whatever that number was, and also Al Horford 120 million as the tail end of his career.
yeah,
Like those two things are very stupid
yeah.
compared to giving Ben Simmons. So the thing is though, how healthy will Joel Embiid be? Like if he gets hurt, then you really have like nothing
Well, he gets
if
hurt
you
more
don't
than
have
any of them.
Simmons. What?
He gets hurt more than any of them.
Exactly. So it's like
Yeah,
you need Simmons to be able to carry the team when Embiid's out.
yeah.
And I just like I feel like maybe this is true just because it's Philly, but like I feel like people expect their teams to be like way better and like always win a title. And if
Yeah.
they're not contending for a title, they just need to like tank, and you can't be like this middle of the ground team anymore.
Yeah.
That like, and I
Well,
know
it's
the Sixers,
frustrating after a few years. Like
right? Yeah,
nobody likes that, and it's like there's like this thing that like fans do, or even people who aren't really fans but just live in a region where they're like you have a team that people care about, where you long for this. If you have a bad team like the Sixers were for a lot of the past decade, not just historically bad at one point, but one of the worst teams ever one year. I forgot what year it was. And then you're like, oh my God, just to make the playoffs and be in the mix would be so great. And then, you're that kind of team. And we've talked about this, I think, with the Bills when we've talked more about football, is like, well, all of a sudden, once you're back in that rut where, yeah, you're a playoff team again, but like, then what?
Yeah.
Then you forget what it was like to not be in that mix at all. And now you're focusing on the fact that you're not getting any further, because the goal is still to win a title. Not that I think that people should think you should tank, because I think that, to me, tanking is never the answer, especially in a league where you have a draft lottery. I've seen what
Yeah.
happens when you try to tank and then you don't get a number one pick.
Yeah.
And it's, when the top pick, especially in a league when the top pick isn't guaranteed, um, there's a bit of a middle ground you can have. You can ship some of these guys off and speed up a rebuild, you know,
Yeah.
especially in a league where the cap isn't as hard, as it might be in like the NHL. You have a little bit of a softer cap. You have different roster exemptions you can have to get around the cap. But the cap is still there. So at a certain point, they're going to have, especially because of some of these, look like unfortunate signings, they're going to have to make those decisions sooner or later. Especially if you're continually whittling away the years of this core being together with these, kind of wasted seasons. And the wasted season meaning, you're expecting with this team is something supposed to be a finished product by now. And you see first round exit, or a second round exit. You see like all these things happen over and over again to teams that are more complete. And to the Celtics, which I think is kind of, has a degree of irony to it, because I think the Celtics are doing what the Sixers thought they were doing, where you don't have, where you can take a guy who's indisputably a very good young talent, like, in the Celtics case, Jason Tatum, ramp up some of his skills, turn him into something that he might not have been before, like a scorer, a great all around star, and then that becomes your guy instead of importing a star from somewhere else and trying to build around that. They thought they were going to do that with Ben Simmons. They thought they were going to have this, unique, powerful center who can do it all and score, and like Joel Embiid, who's, got some charisma, he's been on some commercials. He's got some star power. People like him. Kids like him. He has a lot of likability about him. But, if they're not on the court, it doesn't matter. And I think the Celtics are kind of showing this I think, an interesting alternative model where they're not really in that playoff rut where the Celtics, like, they're making runs. They can get to a conference finals. They're one of those teams where there can be a year where things just click the right way. Kind of like the Dirk Mavericks with, against the Heat, where they were in those playoff rut. They were always the team falling out early and not getting it done, built around maybe one or two pretty good players. And, they're good. You can at least get to a point where maybe you're not a LeBron or a Kobe dynasty kind of deal, or a, Warriors dynasty, but you're good enough to where you can have sustained excellence and you can just catch it one year and, things just fall away for you and you can win it all. And I think the Sixers aren't at that point, and they don't have the consistency to be at that point because of injuries, because of cap problems that the Celtics don't really have.
Yeah. So going way back to, which is kind of funny because like, what was it, the 2016 draft or 2017 draft where the Celtics had the first pick. They looked at Fultz for it's like, nah, we don't want to do that, and then traded back to the Sixers so that the Sixers could jump up, get Fultz, and then the Celtics ended up getting Tatum. So it's just kind of funny that like they could have had him
Yeah.
in the first
Oh,
place
yeah.
if they just either if they picked him first or they just waited till third after Lonzo. Um,
Draft mistakes will get you.
yeah, exactly. So I mean that's just interesting. I didn't even think about that till
They
now.
did lose. I mean, the
Um,
Celtics. I mean, I think this is like pretty not breaking news, but I think it was revealed today that Gordon's out for like a month.
oh,
Um,
is he really?
and
Okay.
according to the Athletic.
He's been playing good too, like
I
coming
mean,
back in the
which,
bubble.
if it's not that bad of an injury, if he can get back, I mean, a month doesn't rule him out if they do make a run, which they
Yeah.
could.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
they don't seem too confident of that right now. And then, with the bubble and everything, maybe they won't bring him back at all. Who knows?
Yeah.
Uh, but the Celtics are a team like they're just, they have like a kind of an alternative model to what a lot of teams seem to be trying to do, where like let's bring up a core of guys who can kind of do it all, who can score most importantly, but kind of do it all, bring in a star guy who's not, I mean, not really like viewed necessarily as a star, Kemba Walker, but a guy who, is a great leader and puts up, is an all-star level player, no doubt, and most importantly, is a point guard, which is very hard to find at his level, and just build around that, and I think, in this Eastern Conference especially, I mean, there's not really any other teams outside of the Bucks who you can confidently say are better than the Celtics. I don't see anyone else being a challenge to them, and they could very well beat the Bucks as well because the Bucks are leaning hard on only a couple guys really.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Raptors are very comparable to the Celtics, where they just have a ton of like
Yeah,
pretty good players. No like superstar talent. I think Tatum,
they swung
like,
for the fences though in a way where
yeah.
the Celtics didn't with Kawhi last year when they
Oh
traded
yeah, yeah.
for him.
But I mean, the Celtics, like, I felt like they semi tried to get like AD. Who knows how true that was for
Yeah, I'm sure they talked about it. Why wouldn't
Danny
you?
Ainge. Yeah, yeah, but like
And they have
maybe
pieces
he
to
didn't
trade.
totally go all in or something. But I don't know. I just think Jason Tatum, like, is going to be a superstar like next year. Like,
He's
I
won
feel like he
I
has
think this year was
everything.
his like breakout like household name, or if you follow the NBA, like Jason Tatum's like is a guy. Like he's a guy you
Yeah,
think of
he
when
totally is. Yeah,
you look at like the faces of the league, or at least he should be. Maybe he's not as he doesn't have like at least for now at least we haven't seen him show like the kind of like star personality maybe of like a Joel Embiid or whoever else you want to think of, or maybe even Steph Curry or guys who you just see around outside of the court a lot, or LeBron, guys
or
like
even
that.
Luca. Honestly, like Luca's character after like off camera,
Yeah,
or I guess off
well the
court.
thing is with him is I mean he's foreign, so I mean that's always a little bit harder, and he's very very young.
I
Like,
guess, but I think like Porzingis doesn't really have that like charisma, and didn't have
they
that
tried to
at
force it on him. I remember
yeah.
when he was with the Knicks. Do you remember that like awful streaming or like music streaming? There was like some not music streaming service. There was like some
Oh, title or whatever? Or no?
Yeah, no, it wasn't that. I don't know. It was a similar looking commercial to the title commercial before that crashed and burned. But it was like all these celebrities and like talking about creating and like being like, fucking like influencers. And like it ended with like a clip of like Porzingis for some reason Porzingis is at this table. This was like, 3 or 4 years ago when he really hadn't done a whole lot. But he's just on the Knicks, so he gets to be in the commercial. He just goes, "Let's create," and just like looking at the camera, it's like, what are you doing here, dude? Are they like forcing you into like this like star like thing? Like,
The
why are
answer
you
is
with all these
yes.
celebrities who have accomplished stuff? But yeah, like I think maybe it's good for him too that he'll be the second best player,
Yeah.
on the Mavericks. He doesn't have to have that role forced on him. But yeah, with Tatum, I mean, he's just letting his all of the stats speak for himself. Maybe that's not the worst thing in the world.
Yeah.
And it's working out for them. They don't have a Giannis. There's only so many of those guys that'll ever exist in the universe. But they have the kind of roster to where if things are clicking the right way one year, or if unfortunately if like someone gets hurt on another team who's really important, or some guys are just hot one year, then things can really click for them in a way where the Celtics just don't have, or the Sixers don't have the depth where this core can do that.
Yeah. I mean, also it's remarkable when you can easily say that Kemba Walker is the third best player I think on this team. Like I
Oh
think
my God,
Jaylen
yeah.
Brown has. I mean, Kemba Walker is kind of backtracked I thought this year, especially not being like the guy in Charlotte.
Yeah.
But like Jaylen Brown has ascended like almost in tandem with Tatum, just like where they both were last year to where they are this year. It's just like incredible.
I honestly get them like confused a lot, especially with like 4 months of like 4 or 5 months of like no NBA.
I
Like
guess.
Jalen Brown and Tatum, like I don't know, like I think it's because like they're both like J, like their names start with JAY,
Yeah.
and like they're on the Celtics, and they're both like these kind of like just solid like scoring guys. I know one's obviously
Six,
in a very
seven
different
wings
position,
that could
shooting
play
guard, but
defense. Yeah.
like it's kind of like they feel like they're like a hive mind, like they feel like nobody like stands out, but everyone's really good.
Yeah.
And no one's really again like a lot. This is a common theme on a lot of these teams that there's not anyone huge. Which is weird because like I feel like it's becoming more and more normal for teams to have large guys who can shoot. But what's ended up happening is like they're building around guys who aren't huge, but they're like, 6'6" to 6'8" who can shoot. Which it's kind of like this weird medium of like, yeah, there's not all these guys sprouting up everywhere who are like 6'10" plus shooters, but there's also not, 6'2", 6'3" guys who are taking over anymore either. So it's kind of interesting what a lot of these playoff rosters look like when, you go through these matchups and like what they actually look like, either both on paper and in person. Like you don't have any like huge guys dominating, and then you have a couple of them, like Embiid. You have, Embiid and Vucevic today, and you have Giannis obviously. So a lot of it's like we're in the middle of like a roster revolution. I feel like, and especially with you look at teams like the Nuggets and Jazz as well, or even the Raptors as they are. A lot of stretch guys, a lot of guys who normally would be very different roles in a different era, and the guys who can kind of do everything.
Though I wouldn't call that like new. I feel like that was new like 3 years ago. I feel like that's kind of what everyone's trying to go for now is these like
Yeah,
stretch fours
this isn't
who
the
could
first year with it, but it's just like
yeah.
I don't know. I just feel like it's more widespread. I mean, it's just growing to
Yeah.
an extent where like you look through all of these raw like anytime you look through like matchups or you look through these playoff games like we're doing, and you really just take a look at it and it's like, wow, all these like everyone looks like they're like kind of doing the same thing, and then like there's a few teams that like got lucky enough or bad enough at one point to acquire some super huge guy, some 7+ foot, superstar guy who kind of stands out above all of the smaller guys.
Right, but like those 7 foot players really need to be versatile now. They can't be
Yeah,
like the Greg Monroes or even like Gobert is kind of like the last of his breed, I just think.
yeah,
Like I don't think you're gonna see another rim stopping player that really can't shoot from
yeah. Guys
outside.
like Jokic are the future on
Yeah, exactly. Um, so talk about that series. Oh my God, like Donovan Mitchell just going off because Conley's out. Like Bogdanovich hasn't
Yep.
been in the bubble, so he drops 57 points. I think he was the first player since Michael Jordan to score over 50 under the age of 24. Um,
Wow.
so Spida, I love it. He's great. He's amazing. Like fuck all his haters. Who
Does he have haters?
I think so. People think that Donovan Mitchell is like overrated.
I guess everyone has
Um,
haters at this point because, like,
that's true.
everyone, it's so easy to talk shit, you can just post. You can
Yeah.
just post anywhere. So I guess that even Donovan Mitchell on the Jazz has haters now, I guess. Who knew?
Yeah, but like I felt like and even this is just like general knowledge, but he hasn't been as great of a playmaker like even before the bubble. But I thought he's improved that in the bubble, and this game too. He had like 7 assists. Like he really had to carry this offensive team at this weight since
Well,
there's
they don't
no
have anybody,
well because they don't have Bogdanovich and they don't have
without
Conley. So
without Conley, especially. Yeah, Conley's out for. Is he out for the whole play? Did he opt out,
I
or is he
I
just
think
out for his
so
kid?
because he's got his kids. So like I mean if he comes in. Like he might
Okay,
be able to come in the next series, I
that's
think, but
bad
like
news
he
for
might
them. Yeah.
take care of the kid instead. I don't know how that works.
Yeah, I don't know if you
Um,
gotta wait or what, but yeah, I mean that's just why you see is like the points have to come from somewhere. So sometimes you just get a freak thing where I guess 57 of them go to one guy in a game where they lose by it went to overtime, so it wasn't like it was all for nothing. I mean they were right there. Um, and I don't know if once you get to overtime, there's just a certain maybe an exhaustion that sets in, or the fact that it's a bit of a reset, and you got to have a new tip off, and it's just kind of resets the game a little bit, and then that momentum that you have from scoring all that kind of goes away, especially in the face of a Nuggets team that's so much more balanced, and
yeah,
they kind of look a little shaky sometimes. They kind of have that classic Nuggets like, oh, they're gonna lose again in the early rounds, like it's like Michael Porter Jr. and Jokic are like I don't know, like they always like look weird together. Like I feel like the defensive communication isn't always there.
so I feel like at least with Porter and Jokic, like offensively they're amazing, and then when they go on the defensive end, they're just like a
Yeah,
mess.
but Porter's super
Like
young. That's just
yeah, yeah,
part of that
and he
too.
barely found time
Yeah,
on this team already.
but then what they have Jamal Murray, who can, he's kind of their answer to Mitchell in a way. He's a very similar type of player as far as their abilities to score, their style, their size. They're kind of they're the engine of it. And then you have Jokic, who I think when you have a series like it's kind of like what I said, my philosophy about why I felt the Blazers would make the playoffs, right? When you have a mix of teams that all seem pretty even, who has the best player or the best players? And Jokic is the best player in the series, I think. I think
Yeah,
he's the
without a
guy
doubt.
that most other teams don't have, and the Jazz definitely don't have. So I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, you could see anything from a sweep to, I wouldn't be surprised if this ends up being like a sweep type series,
Really?
or a 5-gamer. Yeah, I just think
I think
that,
it's tight. I think it's close. I don't know.
yeah, I mean, it
Um,
went to overtime, but like it took a 57-point game for it to get to overtime. Like how often is that going to happen? That's got to be deflating, I would think, when you have that kind of a historic performance where people are putting you up with Michael Jordan and you lost. You
yeah.
lost the same way as if you would have lost by 30 points, and as if it was a blowout. Like that's very deflating if, for any human being to have to take that. I mean, and have Joe Ingles be your next top scorer, is just it's not a good formula unless Conley comes back and they can, make it even again. But I don't know what Conley's, short-term status is. I don't know when he's coming.
Yeah, I don't
He's
I
coming.
don't think he's coming back, at least for the series. I just like Gobert, I feel like they need to use more in the post, and they need to like the whole Gobert Jokic thing is just very interesting because they're two like integral centers to their teams but play so differently.
Yeah.
Um and I feel like they need to get that like rim running two game that like Murray Jokic had and do that more with Mitchell and Gobert, which like they did a little bit, but I feel like this was just much more
Gobert
of
is
a
not that guy.
yeah.
He's not dynamic enough. He's a boards guy. And he had a little bit more
Andre
points than he
Drummond.
normally. I think, he had
Yeah.
some points in this past game because like they didn't have a whole lot of options to deal with. You had Ingles, you had Clarkson, and then after that it's just kind of like it falls off. Like, were they going to go to like Moutier? Like Moutier isn't really much of a force in the league at this point. I think his kind of time is come and gone as far as being a prospect goes. So yeah, like it's a level of dynamism that they just don't really possess, and depth as well. Not that the Nuggets are like way deeper, but just the top
Oh,
level
they
talent.
definitely are. They absolutely are. Like they don't have Harris or they don't have
Well,
Will
they have
Barton.
Millsap as well. Yeah.
No, but like Harris didn't play and who did I just say? Jesus Christ. Um, Will Barton didn't play.
Well, they
So
have Bol
like
Bol who didn't play.
exactly, and all those
I
players like
forgot about Bol Bol.
yeah, but he was great in the bubble. He
And
was so much fun
my boy
to
Noah
watch.
Vonleh, who I love. He loves that little corner three, Noah Vonleh. Little stretch three guy. I like him.
All you're doing, you're commenting like vaguely about former Knicks players,
Yeah.
like around other teams
No,
now.
I wouldn't know who Noah Vonleh was if it wasn't for that. That's why.
Yeah. He's been around though. He's been like everywhere. I feel
Yeah,
like.
he's cool. I like Vonleh, but
Yeah.
no one uses him. No sane team uses Vonleh a significant amount.
Oh no.
But
No.
Bol Bol's cool. Like Bol Bol's a guy who like I can't believe like fell in the draft. Like
Yeah, but
I understand he got hurt or whatever in college, but like I don't know what else you need to see out of a guy other than being like tall as fuck and like
can shoot.
shooting and everything else. Like I just don't know what else you want.
I think it was definitely the injury thing. It's and the only reason like the Nuggets can do this just because how deep they are. They can go for these people that can be transcendent stars like Michael Porter Jr. or Bol Bol. Well, I guess maybe not transcendent stars, but like pretty like great NBA players.
Yeah.
And if they fail, it's like okay, whatever. We have all these players to back them up that like will still make the playoffs. Will still be like a hard exit. And just speaking of this team, like they are young, but they are experienced. Like they played 2 Game 7s last year.
Yeah.
And I feel like they like that experience that they had was definitely utilized in this overtime win, and I feel like we'll like probably carry them to this win, and then they'll are they the 3-6? I totally forget. Yeah, they're 3-6, so they would play Clippers, which I feel like could be a hard out just because of like they
Well, it'd
both
be
have
interesting because Clippers and Nuggets, those are two teams that like I know like it's weird talking about like like their history when like the rosters are so different than they were, but like well for the Nuggets case, I mean they've had a couple playoff attempts now with coming up short. The Clippers as well, but not with Kawhi.
yeah
But that's interesting because the Clipper Nuggets are like these two franchises that even when they've had these, been good for the last 10 or so years on and off, can't get out of that second round.
Yeah.
And in that series, you would have, one of those two franchises finally breaking through to an extent and into being, actual legit contenders. I mean, I don't know if the Clippers have ever been to a conference finals. I don't think they have
I
as a
don't think so either.
franchise. Even
That
when,
was the whole thing. They couldn't get out of the second round.
yeah. And then, preceding that, you had decades of being a literal punchline.
Yeah.
And then they were like in Buffalo or whatever for a few years.
Well, that was like the 60s. They were in San
Yeah,
Diego.
yeah, whatever the hell that was. I don't know.
Yeah.
They were like four different places, but it'd be very interesting. Whereas the Nuggets, it's not since the peak of the Melo years did they, sniff anything close to that before running into Kobe and the Lakers.
Yeah.
Um,
This is just like a random fact though, because I read like ESPN A Love Story, which is like it was like a 10-part documentary. And I think I said this on this podcast like way back when I was first reading it. Did you know the Rochester Royals had the rights to the first round pick or the first overall pick to get Bill Russell,
oh
but
my God.
they gave it to the Celtics because like whoever owned the Celtics at that time like had these like really good box seats to like Broadway or something, so they traded the Bill Russell
Oh,
pick to get these box seats in like New York City.
oh
Um,
my God.
and when you that could have been transcendent. Like
Where did you
Rochester
read
could still
that?
have an NBA team if like they draft Bill Russell and they win like four
Oh my
titles or something,
God.
right? Isn't that wild?
Well, they got even when right not long after they moved, they had Oscar Robertson.
Yeah,
I mean, that was just a few years later, maybe 2 years later, like shortly after Rochester moved, I think, or was it like Cincinnati at first?
yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and they got, I mean, that's, back to back like Hall of Fame players right there. I mean, it's, I guess I hate rich people. They, that
Eat the
sucks.
rich.
Where'd you read that?
It was ESPN A Love Story. It's like three ESPN writers slash announcers. I think it was Jackie Mack, Rafa something Bartholomew, and then I forget the other one. But so it's a video documentary that I think is on ESPN Plus. I need to find it. But like they wrote the whole script like in a book, which I thought
Oh,
was more helpful because it was very talk a lot about like the ABA and how that like merged with the NBA. They talked about how
why,
like what's
why
up?
did the ESPN A Love Story was called?
Like basketball love story, but it's by
Oh,
people from ESPN.
oh, okay. Because I was like, that's
Yeah.
all before ESPN existed. So like, what?
Oh, yeah.
Well, that makes sense.
No, they
Wow.
just kind of like went through everything, like decade per decade. Talked a lot about how like Jordan and how like the NBA superstar wasn't really a thing till he came in and like started getting endorsements and
I
all that
think
stuff.
Rochester would have not only a subway and a rail system, but flying cars if we had Bill Russell.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It would
Yeah,
have
we'd have flying cars
changed
in Rochester
life.
right now.
Kodak would have, evolved
We'd
to a
have like
digital
12
camera
titles.
company. Yeah.
We'd be
Google
like
would
we'd
maybe
be
be
like Green
there.
Bay, but like bigger and cooler than Green Bay.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Rochester's way better than Green Bay
Oh
currently
my, dude, Green Bay is
without.
Syracuse.
Yeah.
It's literally just Syracuse. It's the same size. They
Yeah.
don't even have the fucking college either.
Yeah. They
They just
literally
have
just
the
have
football.
Lambeau. That is it.
Yeah,
Um,
sucks.
yeah.
God damn. I wish you could.
Sorry, anyone listening from Wisconsin. Bucks are good, so I think you're
Yeah, you do
fine
have
with
the.
that.
Yeah, that's Milwaukee. Yeah, you got Milwaukee.
The
Whatever.
Packers are always great, so it's like no hate there.
Yeah, they're not
Anyway,
going to care
so
what we
I
think
think
about
this
the
is
Packers. We like the Bills and the Raiders. We suck.
the Vegas Raiders.
Yeah, we like
Anyways,
Vegas and Buffalo, two hack
we're
towns.
way too off topic now. So like what I thought was the most interesting series, and I think this is pretty um, mutual around like NBA circles, but like the Rockets, Thunder, and just the whole like
Rockets
Russell
are kicking
Westbrook
their
going
ass right
this
now, by the way.
back is yeah, and the Rockets are killing them.
Yeah.
But like the forget all the like pretenses where it's like oh Westbrook's coming back, like even Harden's coming back against his old team. It's just like the whole Rockets like analytic. We won't shoot unless it's a 3-pointer or near the rim and try to get all these fouls. Versus like an OKC team that shoots a lot of mid-range jumpers and like still plays Adams significant amount of minutes.
Oh
So
my
it's like
God, yeah.
it's like two different worlds of teams, and like I feel like they're very close. And like you couldn't really pick a winner, even though the Rockets are going to win this game.
I
Um,
yeah, I think Harden's so far above the rest of them, or even Chris Paul at this point in his career, as far as just taking over a game, that like this series particularly, like they can survive if they have to do it without Westbrook, which Westbrook's out for this game. I think he had like a pec or something, some like
oh really? Oh damn.
chest or shoulder type, yeah, something like
Oh
that.
yeah. Oh shit.
I mean, he's a athletic whirlwind. He gets hurt a lot, especially when you're doing that when you're. I think he's 30 this year, right? 30, going on 31. Who knows how much longer he can keep that style up. But yeah, I mean, I'm hoping the Rockets. I mean, if I had to root for a team in all of these playoffs, it's the Rockets. Just
Really?
'cause,
Okay.
yeah, I just like Westbrook and I like Harden and I like Eric Gordon. And I saw like a 6-year-old just like naming kid players I like, and I like Mike D'Antoni, and I think it would just be cool because it's like the two Rockets titles before were like without MJ around really, and then you get one that's during like a bubble pandemic recession
Oh yeah. No,
hellscape.
no more Warriors like super
Yeah,
team
and then they
kind of
just
thing.
get that in the middle of this weird playoffs. I think it would just be cool and weird, especially because I want Russ to win. Russ Westbrook's my favorite player in the league right now, and I want their experiment to work. So I think it would be cool if it did, and I think it's one of the really to me the only like really interesting thing in the NBA this season was the Rockets and like the way they're constructed and their players they have. Um, so yeah, I mean that's just what I root for in these playoffs because I think everyone else it's like, oh, okay, whatever. I don't feel anything about this.
Yeah. What was it? What's kind of funny too is because like, I guess when they go back, I think Steve Nash said this too, when like D'Antoni was their coach and they had like the Marion and like Stoudemire in his prime and all the like that super like 7 seconds or less teams.
Yeah,
That like Steve Nash was kind of like, I wish we went all in on that, like even more so, because like today everyone pretty much plays that 7 seconds or less
yeah.
shoot very quick, but it's like I felt like the Rockets did that this year, where they're like, okay, we're not really going anywhere. Chris Paul didn't work, and like the only way we can trade away Chris Paul is to sign someone or to get someone in return that's like a aging, like super inflated contract, which is Russell Westbrook.
Yeah.
Um, so like once they had that, and then they're like, okay, we got Clint Capella. He's like a good rebounder, but he kind of clogs the lane. Westbrook isn't really a shooter anymore, so we need to open that up. And they just took a huge risk and
Is he
basically
hurt, Clint
having
Capella?
what?
Is he hurt or did he opt out?
No, he's on the Hawks now. There was like that huge trade that
Oh yeah,
like
yeah.
then they created this
Yeah.
5 out. Then Russell
Oh,
Westbrook was playing
so he's
good.
exiled, right?
Yeah, he's like at the Hawks. um, so like I felt like that's the best iteration of this team that could possibly happen. Um, and it's just sad because I kind of feel like this might be D'Antoni's last year. Like I feel like Houston, when you were talking about like other teams and having like super high expectations, I think the Rockets had super high expectations.
Is his
The past,
contract up there, Tony?
it might be,
Okay.
but
Damn.
like they just I felt like have been kind of disappointing.
They're
Or
not
like
built for long term. I mean, that's for sure.
yeah, I mean I feel like if he somehow loses his job, he'll get a job like in 24 hours.
Maybe.
Um,
He's getting up. I mean, he's getting up there. Who knows if you'd want to take on
oh
a
yeah,
project, I mean,
I feel like
he's
it's
70,
established.
70 years old next season, dude.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Ugh. Okay.
D'Antoni, you a real one, though.
Yeah.
If you're listening to this
Should have
Snowflake
stayed in
Sports
New York.
podcast.
Yeah. Come
Well,
back. Come on the Snowflake.
yeah, come on, D'Antoni.
We'll talk about the Knicks and Rochester. He
Yeah,
loves
he
it.
spills the beans on his Knicks years. Oh my God, exclusive interview about the Linsanity era.
Tune in next week for
You ever play
Linsanity.
the
Yeah.
Blacktop on 2K20?
Wait, you played Andrew? Wait,
I'm asking you specifically,
what?
like Blacktop mode on 2K20.
Oh no, I've just been playing like season mode with the
Okay.
Raptors just because it's fun. I
I don't know if
know.
I told like 5 years ago when I had like 2K16, like me and when I lived with Shen, we would because we both like worked late because he worked at the fucking morgue and I worked in the news, And sometimes we would do this like game where we do blacktop, and like you get to play like all-time teams, and like we would do like make up rules like, oh, you can only pick point guards, or you can only pick uh, guys who haven't won a championship, or retired guys who haven't won a championship. And so our rule would be like you score or you foul, you just take a drink, and
Yeah.
you get fucking hammered quick. But anyways, did that recently with 2K20 because it was free. They have the 2012 Knicks, dude.
Oh,
I'm
what the
so
mellow
yeah,
second round?
Stat Mello, Lynn, D'Antoni, like it was just hilarious to me that they put that team in that didn't accomplish anything, just out of pure sentiment, because it was just a goofy ass roster.
It's great.
I
It's
love it.
fantastic. We've played that game once and it was
I think
great.
we may have actually done. Yeah, we did the drinking game probably.
Yeah, it was before like people were coming over or something. We were
Yeah,
like,
yeah, I think
we've
that.
created this great game and
Oh,
it
dude,
was a lot of
it's
fun.
fucking killer, dude. It works in like half an hour. You're like buzzed. At
Yeah,
least.
exactly. You are good to go.
Yeah.
Um, all right, any other NBA? Do you care about any other series? Because I feel like all the other series are like don't really
I
matter.
mean, I'm not emotional on any of these. Lakers Blazers, that'll be interesting.
No, it won't.
See, that starts
It
in
will
about
not be
half an
interesting.
hour from now at the time we're recording this pod. Um, what I really it was on my mind is like what I feel like during the seeding during like the bubble before the playoffs, like I wasn't really, and I told you this, I wasn't really watching any of it because I was like, okay, this is in the playoffs. Most of the spots are locked in now, anyways, whatever. But I remember I just keep hearing these stories about like Damian Lillard, sick of disrespect, and Damian Lillard diss track on Paul George, and Damian Lillard scoring 52 points and saying "put respect on my name." I'm like, what? Where did this
Oh,
come?
did you not see what happened when they played the Clippers?
What
Or
happened? Why is he so
oh, so
pissed
I
off?
talked about this last week, but basically the Clippers were trying to tank this game so
Okay.
that the Blazers would win because like the Blazers were the best shot at like messing up the Lakers. So like Dame, it's like wire to wire. Dame gets fouled. They're down by one, and Dame is like a 87% free throw shooter,
Yeah.
and he goes and he misses both free throws.
Oh no,
So
Dame.
like Beverly is just like sitting on the bench and he's like he's gonna let you know what's on his mind and he thinks it's hilarious. It's shocking to everyone that he didn't at least tie this game. And then
Oh.
the Clippers end up winning. Then like Damian Lillard after the game is like, oh they're reacting like that because they respect my name. They expect me to make these shots. Blah blah blah. And then they get at it on Instagram and somehow like Paul George jumps in and is just like oh, like have fun getting knocked out of the first round or something. It's like, do you not remember what happened last year? Like, where you got eliminated because you didn't like jump to Lillard 40 feet out. Um, and it was just weird.
Yeah. I mean the Blazers were like on the verge of going to the finals last year.
Not really. They got swept. Like,
Well, they were in the conference finals.
right, but like I feel like people forget that like their road to the conference finals wasn't that hard.
No, it
Like,
wasn't. No,
I
it
don't
wasn't.
I don't remember who they beat in the first round, but they beat a young Nuggets team that well hasn't really ever been there.
Yeah.
Um, and then they got swept by a KD less
It was
Warriors
just
team.
weird to me because I was like, you just don't hear a lot about Lillard, But I mean, besides, he had that big game winner, that classic photo that came out of it where he's just staring at the camera and everyone's
Oh yeah,
cheering. But other than that, I was just like, paying just cursory attention to the seeding games in the bubble, and I'm just hearing all this stuff about like Lillard being like pissed and just like shitting on Paul George, and I'm like, what is happening in there? What is going?
yeah. The thing is though, like with this series, I think the Lakers are gonna sweep the Blazers just because like the
Well, the
Blazers
Blazers
defense is
defense
so
sucks.
bad.
Yeah. I think you're going to see like, not just the LeBron and, Anthony Davis power, but you're going to see like, I think the real power of, of the improvement that Frank Vogel brings to the Lakers.
Yeah,
Frank Vogel is as much a part of their improvement as, maybe Anthony Davis has been. I mean, I think that the defense and the discipline that he brings to this team is just something that's really going to carry them. And I mean, he's did it with the Pacers with a much less talented roster, I would say, you
Yeah.
know, with Paul George. So I think you're going to start to see that because I mean we've seen these stretches where you know the Lakers struggled during the seeding games. We've seen stretches during normal seasons where you know towards the end or at some point in the year the LeBron whichever team LeBron happens to be on, you know, gets kind of bored. It's magnified. They lose a couple stupid games, and then the playoffs happen, and then what?
Yeah.
Usually they end up sweeping the first round. Historically for LeBron, is he sweeps the first round, and then more often than that he you know, gets all the way to the finals. That's what LeBron does when he gets to the playoffs is he gets to the finals. And it's just, you know, it feels foolish, even though he's 35 years old, it just feels foolish to bet against that at this point with all the hype about the Clippers, with, you know, anyone else who may be talked about, you know, as much as someone, you know, like me, maybe rooting for the Rockets. I really anticipate the Lakers, you know, even if they drop a game or two against the Blazers somehow, you know, I really anticipate them getting the finals. I think that's just the safest bet.
Yeah, that's fair. I don't know. I feel like any mixture of Lakers, Clippers, and then Bucks on the other side is like the safe thing to say. Um, and I just like it's playoff LeBron. It's like similar to like Tom Brady. Like you're not gonna bet against it until it like stops happening.
Yeah.
Um, and then once you fail at that, then you're like, okay, like this is over.
Here we go. Yeah. The end of an
Yeah,
era.
yeah.
Or if
You're
there were
not.
like, you know, major roster changes, you know, but like the
Yeah,
roster changes and the coaching has only improved for the Lakers over,
yeah,
you know, since they kind of what you would think would be their bottoming out last year, you know, where they missed the playoffs. LeBron was finally like, you know, looking injury prone, you know, all that kind of stuff. So, you know, I feel like that's just not going to happen this time around, and I think you're going to see a kind of I think what the NBA probably wants to see too is somewhat of a passing of the torch. You know, is this idea of Giannis being, you know, crowned and winning the title, and LeBron is kind of, you know, kind of like the Magic and Jordan dynamic, you know, in '91.
yeah,
You know, but you know, sports don't always follow those little storylines. You know, sometimes you get those disruptions that, you know, someone just isn't having it.
yeah. Yeah, that's true. All right, you got mail.
Oh
Is
my
that your
God,
transition?
there's so many
um,
people under like 25 even who don't even like know what like
know what
why.
that? I don't
Yeah.
think I've ever actually seen that movie, to be quite honest. Um, but yeah,
I
the
remember
post
having
office is
AOL and hearing
getting
that.
yeah, the post office is getting assaulted by Republicans and just like Donald Trump on a year where we're doing a literal pandemic and that we are dependent on the post office for getting the votes like counted and just like allocating for everything. And it just sounds like it's just going to be an absolute shit show. They're not going to have enough money. They're not going to have enough resources to do all these things. This postmaster general guy is just a real douche. I don't really have much more to say on this. I assume you, Chris, have more insight. Or,
Yeah. Yeah, I'll just add this, and it's that, you know, one, when it comes to the post office, right, there's a narrative that's been happening since the 80s, and it's on purpose, and that I wouldn't say is backed by the media, but is kind of facilitated because they don't really know how to challenge it and like actually reframe it. And it's that this idea of the post office losing money. And there's two things with that. One, the idea of a public service losing money is entirely mythological, right? I mean, we don't talk
yeah,
that way about the military. We don't talk that way about, you know, any public service that we have, right? That just spends money because it provides a service that is either intangible or tangible. Two, at the start of this most recent iteration, you know, of the post office, you know, losing money, quote unquote, is rooted in something that happened during the Bush years, where in 2006, which, you know, Bush's popularity was cratering, they were going to lose Congress for the first time in, you know, 12 or 13 years that year to the Democrats. They passed a law requiring the post office to fund 75 years of its pension in advance. And now, even going by capitalist logic, and even going by the logic of, let's say the post office actually is a business, which it's not, but let's say it actually is, you would only do that if you are trying to sabotage that business. Like nobody funds 75 years of pensions in advance. It's stupid. There's no reason to do that unless you're trying to create excuses to cut and privatize it in the future. So that's the thing is that, and it's hard to counter that narrative for a lot of people in the media because it's a long process, right? It's done through little things like that. There's no bill that says to privatize the post office bill. No, it's done through things like that where you force them into these financial holes that are unnecessary, that don't have anything to do with the actual service itself, and then you create, reasons for it to be chipped away at, to be privatized. And now, and I think really why you're seeing it pop up, and not that I would ever be confident about a Joe Biden victory, because there's no reason to be confident about that. What the polls are not looking that much different right now than what they looked like for Hillary, although the dynamics are different, right? Trump's an incumbent. People are sick of Trump, whereas back then he was something new, or at least a new kind of voice, even if his policies were pretty similar to Bush. There's just kind of like, it just feels like he's looking for, or even if he loses, to just looking for a reason to just, go back into the media once he's gone out of office and just always have an excuse for why he lost, right? Not that he doesn't have the stamina or the will or the, or even the ideology to like stay in office if he loses, right? It takes a lot of toughness. And I don't think any aspect of the federal government would back him in doing that. But it does create enough confusion and abstraction to where, either maybe worst case scenario, he could pull something like the Bush v. Gore in 2000, especially since, they do have the court and they do have the Senate still, to where you can create enough confusion on election night if it's close to kind of draw things out, and then turn it into a political opinion as to who won the election. Kind of like what we've done with the virus, like we've done with masks. That's just kind of like what I see, and it's just also, it's part of a long process of trying to privatize any and all services that can be for the public good, that can be made for profit. When in fact it should be the opposite, right? The Postal Service should be nationalizing Amazon and UPS. Those should be nationalized and brought under the Postal Service's command. But yeah, it's just that's really what I see out of it is like, this isn't necessarily a new thing, but like the narrative you're seeing about, even from like, so-called liberal media, right? Like, is that the post office is losing money. And it's important to know that this is a part of a decades-long project of framing things in a way where a public good can lose money. And the kind of delegitimizing of these, pretty core institutions, especially the post office, which the first few decades of the U.S.'s history, the post office was the only thing that made the U.S. real. It was the only thing the federal government actually did. They didn't tax. Because how they raised money was through trade tariffs and through stealing native land and selling it. They didn't do income taxes yet. They didn't do income tax yet. So the only thing that made the United States a real political entity was the fact that the Postal Service existed. So it's, it cuts, there's a lot of different ways, it cuts to the very core of, American identity and the very few things that create the U.S., keep the U.S. as a inherent political project, or coherent political project, not inherent, but a coherent political project. And it also is just part of a process of like delegitimizing institutions and kind of turning as many things as possible into fractured opinions and grievances instead of just, plainly shared facts and events and results. And as long as that's happening, and it only serves to keep people disengaged. But yeah, well, we'll see what happens. I mean, really,
Yeah.
what can happen really is that if it's a blowout election night, which is also possible, then it won't matter because the mail-in ballots might not matter because we'll already have the results. And then, he'll still be bitching about it probably until he dies.
So the whole thing with mail-in ballots, though, is you're not going to know the results the day of. You're going to know the results in like a week when they're counting all
Well, it
these
depends
ballots.
how many people do the mail-in ballots.
And when they do it, if they do it early enough,
Yeah.
maybe people won't, though. Maybe people will give them the benefit of the doubt and let
Because
them
even in a normal year,
postmark.
like a quarter of the votes nationally are mail-in, and we typically know who won that night, even then. The last three elections, we've known.
Yeah, but like this is not a normal election. We like
Right.
are in a pandemic. I
You don't
think
know
you're
how
going
many
to
people are
see a
going to, like, are people going to be
huge.
turned off, from mail-in ballot? I mean, I even during these primaries, over these last few months, or the one in June or whatever, I didn't do mail-in. I was like, fuck it, I'm just gonna go in person. I'm not chancing that, you know.
Yeah. I mean, it
So
was weird. I've said it on this podcast before, but like Oregon only does mail-in ballots. Like you have to do it. There's no polling stations. Um,
that
and
sucks.
they're actually it increases voter turnout because you don't have to vote like on the one day. Like what if you're working 12 hours or if you have a family, you basically could fill out your ballot like a month in advance if you really wanted to. You don't have to, or just like a couple days, and then you just put it in like libraries all around have these like boxes of voters, and you just put it in like you don't even have to mail it or like buy stamps or whatever. Um, but I guess going back to like the post office, I just think it's like very ironic or coincidental that like a Republican kind of thinking like a like government is like a business is trying to get rid of a company that like houses the most veterans or like employs the most veterans, and you're trying to be like a pro-military, pro like veteran mentality that you just wanted to slash all these jobs and uh, leave them
Oh,
out to
well, that's the
dry.
thing is
Just
they're not even slashing the jobs. Is they're just, you
oh right,
know,
yeah,
yeah. I mean, they're just delaying what's actually happening right now. And I think they actually the guy who's in charge of it, the Postmaster General, I think it's like Louis DeJoy, I think his name is. He is a direct Trump donor, right? So he's a crony who he appointed to Postmaster General, confirmed by the Republican Senate. I think in 2017, his first year in office. Um, and basically, what's been happening tangibly is that they've prevented them from having overtime, which is a pretty normal thing in for mailmen, is that they have overtime to make sure all the mail is delivered for their day. Um, so that immediately creates a cascading effect where things are 2 days late, 3 days late, 4 days late, including things like medicine that people need during a pandemic, especially. Um, and then it's getting rid of mailboxes so you have less kind of delivery points, you have less places to process mail. So those are things that have actually been happening on the ground. Now maybe job cuts are part of a longer term project, um, but I think really it's just it's a part of a long line of things, the kind of gut things that are directly tied to public good without any attachment to, without the ability to like leech in and make a profit off it. Now, even with that said, companies like Amazon, which as Trump has pointed out, not because he gives a shit, but because Jeff Bezos is, a liberal, so to speak.
okay,
Um, like even he's pointed out that like companies like Amazon just use the postal service to make tons of money. So you already see that happening where the public infrastructure of the post office, as well as the infrastructure of our, roads, transportation, and all those other things, are being used just so a handful of people can like make a historically godly amount of money. So you're already seeing the postal service's resources be drained not by the government, but by failure and inaction by the government, but also from these companies that already exist that are handling their own mail, like Amazon, like UPS and FedEx, who leech off of the public infrastructure for shareholder profit. So that's the long-term solution to this, is not just to stop the disruption that's going on that the Joy is instituting, because that's important, but it's also too defensive, right? The long-term, I think, goal, if you're someone who really wants to see this through, is that the post office should have a command over the other postal services that are privatized in the country, and they should be nationalized, and funded indefinitely. But yeah, it's nothing new, but it's to see it used in an election is it's pretty alarming. I don't blame people for being afraid, because if it's not a blowout or if it's close, it's things are gonna get ugly.
yeah. I
Things are
mean,
gonna
I
get
feel
real
like I've
fucked
said it
up.
on here plenty of times, but like you cannot predict what's going to happen in November and
Oh
August.
my god, I know.
Like it's way too early. We've said this. This is like almost repeat. Like you bringing up how Trump going into the media was exactly what people were talking about in
He's
2016.
gonna, that's what it's gonna happen when he loses. He's gonna be
Right.
which is like he was before he was running, right? Those few
Right,
years,
but
like
like even if he loses and something happens, like the Republican Party is like broken now, or like the conservative constituents, like whatever comes out, like in 2024, if he loses, is going to be like a
they're gonna nominate a
Trumpian.
QAnon guy.
A what?
You know what QAnon is?
I've seen it vaguely.
They're like the whole like conspiracy like movement.
Yeah.
It's like really incoherent, and it's you can do. There's literally a whole podcast just about that. So I obviously can't go into that now. But they
Yeah.
actually just got their first nominee, like a nominee for a House seat, won a Republican primary somewhere that is like a
Oh wow.
QAnon conspiracy believer. So that's going to be like what the Tea Party was. I feel like back when Obama won, when the Republicans were last basically destroyed after Bush.
Yeah.
You found the Tea Party replacement. Now I feel like you're going to end up veering into this psychopath, conspiracy theory, like just completely detect, like everyone's a pedophile, like kind of mentality that you already see it online, right? I mean, you probably see
Yeah.
people on your Facebook who all of a sudden just like discovered that missing children exist, as if like, oh, now is when you want to care about that in the middle of like a
Yeah.
pandemic, recession, like massive like racial protests that are like at a historic, enduring level.
Massive
Now
in income inequality.
yeah, no, sex trafficking. Okay, that's the
Yeah.
real problem, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, like that's a thing to look out for. I think is that's what they're going to turn into if or when Trump loses.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. All right. I think that concludes this
I'm gonna watch some ball
week's
now, I guess.
ball. Yeah. Blazers Lakers coming up.
Yeah, one.
Thank you, Chris, for coming on. It was
You're
a
welcome.
pleasure to have you on.
Oh yeah, love it.
Please rate and review us wherever you get your podcast. 5 star, 5 star. Follow us on Instagram at Snowflake Sports. And have a good one.
Hell yeah.